NBC 10 Breaking News.
Right now at 11, a deadly fiery tragedy in the heart of Philadelphia.
This is, without a doubt, one of the most tragic days in our city's history.
An unimaginable loss, a dozen lives taken in this raging inferno, 8 of the victims innocent children.
You know, losing sisters, like, I never thought this would happen. Never.
You can't comprehend that.
All of this as investigators try to understand why these homes went up in flames.
I've been around for 35 years now, and this is probably one of the worst fires I've ever been to.
You're watching NBC 10 News at 11. I'm Jacqueline London.
And I'm Jim Rosenfield, and we are coming on the air tonight on one of the darkest days in Philadelphia's history. 12 people dead tonight in Fairmount after those flames ripped through that row house just behind me with families inside, including young children. That fire started early in the morning, about 6:30 this morning, near 23rd and Ogden Streets, and quickly spread to 2 of the units in that row house, where we learned tonight 19 people lived at last inspection. Now, since we were last on the air with you, Philadelphia revised the death toll to 12 people. Officials now say 8 children are dead tonight instead of 7. And to put this in perspective, this is the 5th deadliest house fire in this country in the last 42 years. Exactly what started this fire, that still hasn't been determined, but we'll have more on that coming up in a minute. But first, as for the timeline, after that fire began, at least one neighbor told NBC 10 they had trouble reaching 911. Earlier tonight, Philadelphia police released a sequence of the calls into the emergency line. They say between 6:36 a.m. and 6:39 a.m., police radio received 36 calls. Police say the first one came in at 6:36 and was answered immediately. The operator transferred the call, they say, to the fire department, and that was answered on 2 rings. A fire truck was called for at 6:38. The first firefighters arriving on the scene here at 6:40. So, according to the official timeline, it took just 4 minutes from the first call for firefighters to arrive here. NBC 10 has live team coverage of the many angles of this tragedy for you tonight. And let's begin with NBC 10's Aaron Baskerville, who's been here in this neighborhood today. And Aaron, I know you've also been able to speak with the victims' family members during this very difficult time for them.
Yeah, you said it best right there, Jim. A very difficult time for everybody. Right now, we're at 23rd and Parrish. We're about a half a block away from the scene. We're also standing right next to what was a receiving center this afternoon. That's where a whole bunch of family and friends came. They gathered. They supported each other. I can tell you the entire city is grieving with them.
God, we ask you for your bless every family member, Lord God.
A circle of prayer in a time of need. Family members leaning on each other after a fast-moving fire killed 12, including 8 kids. One relative tells us she doesn't know how she'll continue on.
I work with children, so to know that my nieces and nephews not here is going to be really hard for me to work with kids again and to be around kids that's not my nieces and nephews. So, you know, that hurts me the most. And, you know, losing sisters, like, I never thought this would happen.
A small group lit candles and gathered outside a nearby school. Others left stuffed animals at the scene.
My sisters and my nephews and my nieces are gone. They are deceased. They are never coming back.
These are some of the faces of the children lost. Their lives leave a deep hole in this Fairmount neighborhood. They include 16-year-old Quentin Terrell Tate McDonald.
Just remember Quentin being a sweet kid. It's just hard right now for this family.
So bless us right now, Lord.
Family members say the only way out from the second-floor unit was through a window, and that was if you could get to it. As the investigation continues on how to avoid another tragedy like this, a relative is looking for change.
I feel like this could have been avoided. So I feel like it should be mandatory that the city goes around making sure that the fire extinguishers are working, the fire alarms are working, and that there's fire extinguishers in every house.
When a tragedy like this happens in the city of Philadelphia, there is an outpouring of support, and of course, this is no different. Family members, just like everybody else, are trying to figure out exactly what happened here. For now, we're live at 23rd and Parrish. Aaron Baskerville, NBC 10 News.
Yeah, Aaron, and as we know, those families also still worried about two others still in the hospital, an adult and a child, both in critical condition tonight. Thank you, Aaron. And earlier this evening, the bodies of the 12 victims were taken to the medical examiner's office in University City. Firefighters and first responders transported the remains in this procession of white vans. NBC 10 is taking a deeper dive tonight into how this fire began, along with the steps that should have been taken to prevent this tragedy in the first place. We looked into standard safety precautions, like the last time the smoke alarms were inspected. NBC 10's Matt DeLucia is joining us live tonight. And Matt, you also spoke with a lawyer contacted by family members tonight. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and Jim, that attorney told me that he expects more to come out of this investigation, including things that perhaps may have prevented this horrible tragedy from happening. Needless to say, though, tonight there are plenty of questions that need answers.
I think not only these families need to know, but I think the citizens of Philadelphia need to know.
Attorney Joseph Marone tells us his office has already been contacted by family members of fire victims. Tonight, ATF is still at the scene. Marone says the investigation right now is critical.
And this is a PHA housing unit where people rely on the assistance of the government. They should make sure that all of the safety precautions have been taken, and whatever went wrong should be obviously figured out, determined, and corrected.
The row home duplex did have smoke alarms, but fire officials said none of them were working.
I've been around for 35 years now, and this is probably one of the worst fires I've ever been to.
According to the Philadelphia Housing Authority, the B unit, which was on the second and third floors, was last inspected on May 5th. At that time, the agency says 6 smoke detectors were working after they replaced the batteries in 2. And on April 23rd, the bottom unit, Unit A, was inspected, and they say 7 detectors were working. While still unclear in this particular case, the Housing Authority said tenants frequently disable smoke alarms when batteries need replacing.
That's one of the biggest issue for us is like every time we come in inspection, like as evident from the last one, like we had to replace 2 batteries, replace the smoke detectors, and these are 10-year smoke detectors, so that's something like we run into quite often in our properties.
As for how many people were living in both units, the PHA told NBC 10 at last inspection 5 were living in the bottom unit, and as of October, 14 people from the same family were living in the upper unit. Today, the deputy fire commissioner said as many as 18 were in the upper floors at the time of the fire.
It is a tremendous amount of people to be living in a duplex
with no means of escape except for one door in the front and one in the back.
I think the smoke alarms are the tip of the iceberg. I think there are many other factors that went into this.
And the ATF is still here at the scene. They've got that white van here behind me. And as several sources tell us that a child who lived in the house told investigators that a Christmas tree caught fire. That child was able to run out of the house. The city, though, will only say that this matter is still being investigated. Live in Fairmount, I'm Matt DeLucia, NBC 10 News. Jim.
So much to go through and sift through in what's left of that row home behind me, Matt. Thank you. And as for safety, a simple reminder tonight that you can get free smoke alarms anytime. If you're in Philadelphia, you just call 311 and the fire department will come and install them. As for the rest of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware, you can call your local Red Cross for those smoke detectors. The First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, expressing condolences to the victims of the fire. She tweeted today, "My heart is with the families and loved ones of the victims of the tragic fire in Philadelphia." And the White House says President Biden was briefed earlier today on this tragedy as well. NBC 10 has been bringing you the latest information on the fire since early this morning, and you can always go to the NBC 10 app for more on this tragedy. That's where you'll also be able to sign up for any instant updates and alerts. Any new developments, of course, we'll bring them to you on air and online. And tonight, this block still closed off tonight, and it's going to be quite some time, even when the street does reopen, before this community gets back to normal. For now, I'll send it back to you in the studio, Jacqueline.
And Jim, as each detail came out today, every added victim, each additional picture, it just became harder and harder to comprehend and digest. Such a nightmare.
Very painful and just a tough day, especially for the first responders and firefighters, and obviously all those family members. Jackie.
Absolutely. Jim, thank you. Turning now to your NBC 10 First Alert forecast, a cold and dry Wednesday night, but we are also tracking more snow on the way. Let's go to NBC 10 First Alert meteorologist Crystal Cly with what's to come for us. Crystal.
Yeah, that's right. So we've issued another First Alert for not tonight, but as we go into tomorrow night, about 24 hours from now, we will be tracking that next winter system moving in. This is going to be a quick hitting winter storm. All of our neighborhoods impacted. We're going from midnight through 9 a.m. on Friday morning. For this First Alert, that's when we're looking at a slow morning commute. It might be a bit messy out there with some slippery and even snowy, untreated roads and sidewalks. I do think areas that are treated will fare a little bit better off because the intensity of snow for most of the area shouldn't be nearly as high as what we saw on Monday. There's the look at radar and satellite. Currently just clouds across the region. They've been thinning out throughout the night, but you do notice there's a little bit of a wintry mix that's falling over parts of the Poconos, moving that direction. Might clip a little bit of Berks County in the Lehigh Valley. Generally, that's light and short-lived. Otherwise, in Philly, throughout the night, will fall to near freezing by 7 a.m. in the morning, and then we're stuck in the 30s. You see still at 36, 11 a.m., but it is a dry forecast for our Thursday during the day. It's at night when we track that next system moving in. Coming up in just a few minutes, I've updated my snow totals forecast map. We'll talk more about that and the exact timing of that storm.
Tonight, as the entire country deals with the COVID surge, a CDC panel has recommended Pfizer's COVID booster for kids 12 to 15 years old, at least 5 months after their second dose. The recommendation comes 2 days after the FDA cleared the extra doses for this age group. The CDC is also clarifying its guidelines for people who want to use COVID tests after they have tested positive for the virus. The agency says a rapid antigen test can be taken around day 5. If it comes back positive, you should stay away from others for another 5 days. If you don't have symptoms, you can leave isolation after 5 days. Last week, the CDC came under fire for shortening the isolation time from 10 days down to 5. Health Commissioner Dr. Cheryl Bedegal says the federal government will open a COVID testing site at Sabati Rec Center in Southwest Philly. A soft launch is planned tomorrow. Then it will operate from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. starting Friday. The site is expected to administer about 500 tests a day. Dr. Bedegal says during this COVID surge, if you have certain symptoms, you should act like you're positive and stay home. In recent weeks, we have told you about the high demand for COVID tests, but low supplies. Now the federal government is trying to ease that burden in Philadelphia.
If you have cough or cold symptoms, a fever, or other upper respiratory symptoms, odds are very good right now that you have COVID.
Today, the White House COVID-19 response team announced that another COVID testing site will open in Delaware. NBC 10 reached out to the White House, Delaware health officials, and FEMA for details. But at this point, we don't know where or when that will happen. Philadelphia will hold more free COVID testing sites tomorrow. Here are the locations and times: Triumph Baptist Church, Beloved St. John Evangelistic Church, and Mifflin Square Park. Next, the Capitol is on high alert as tomorrow marks the first anniversary of the Capitol insurrection. So what has changed since then, and how are police preparing in case anything happens tomorrow?